The Caribbean sun climbed high into a brilliant blue sky, its warmth spreading across the tranquil sea like a blanket. Below, the MV Ocean Serenity sliced cleanly through the gentle waves, a magnificent white vessel on a voyage to paradise. On board, life was a picture of perfect relaxation. Passengers lounged by the pool, sipping colorful drinks and laughing without a care in the world. The air was filled with the cheerful sounds of music, conversation, and the distant cry of a seagull. This was the dream they had all paid for. A peaceful escape from the everyday grind, a floating haven of luxury and calm in the heart of one of the world's most beautiful seas. At the helm on the ship's bridge, Captain William Harris, a seasoned mariner with decades of experience, watched over his domain. At 54, he had a calm and steady presence that inspired confidence in his crew. He scanned the horizon, a familiar and comforting routine. The sea was his life, and he knew its moods better than his own. Everything looked normal. The water was a placid expanse of turquoise, the ship's systems were all green, and the 377 passengers were enjoying their morning. For them, this was just another glorious day at sea, a postcard-perfect moment on their journey to Barbados. They were completely unaware that they were sailing directly into a deadly trap. The ship itself, the Ocean Serenity, was an impressive feat of engineering, stretching 482 feet from bow to stern. It was more than just a vessel, it was a floating community carrying people from 17 different nations, each with their own stories and dreams for this vacation. It also carried assets valued at over $120 million, a glittering prize that had not gone unnoticed by those who watched from the shadows. The passengers, lost in their holiday bliss, were oblivious to the immense value they represented, not just in their wallets and jewelry, but as potential hostages. Their peaceful bubble of serenity was incredibly fragile, about to be shattered by a brutal reality. This part of the Caribbean, just 70 nautical miles north of the Venezuelan coast, had a darker reputation that wasn't advertised in the glossy cruise brochures. In the last 8 months alone, this stretch of water had witnessed over 100 pirate attacks, a grim statistic known to sailors but hidden from tourists. It was a hunting ground, a place where desperation and greed fueled a ruthless modern-day piracy. For Captain Harris and his crew, it was a known risk, but for the unsuspecting passengers, the danger was unimaginable. They were floating on the edge of a conflict zone, their blissful ignorance the only thing separating them from fear. Miles away, hidden within the humid confines of a rusty warehouse near Venezuela's Paria Bay, the storm was gathering its strength. This was the nerve center for a feared pirate syndicate, and its commander was a man known only as El Barón Rojo, the Red Baron. Miguel Alvarez, a former Venezuelan Special Forces commando, was a strategist forged in discipline and hardened by ruthlessness. He stared intently at a bank of monitors, his face illuminated by the green glow of tracking data. He saw the Ocean Serenity not as a ship full of people, but as a treasure chest floating invitingly across his territory. His voice when he spoke was cold and devoid of any emotion. His orders were chillingly simple and brutally clear. "Take everything!" he commanded his men, his voice cutting through the tense air of the warehouse. "Leave no one alive." For him, this was not just a robbery, it was a declaration of power, a message to the world that he controlled these waters. His pirates, a force of 180 hardened fighters, listened with grim determination. They were not the swashbuckling buccaneers of old legends, they were modern predators, armed with military-grade weaponry and fueled by a desperate ambition. Their loyalty was to El Barón Rojo and the promise of riches he represented, a promise they were willing to kill for. Their vessels were not clumsy wooden galleons, but a fleet of 15 sleek black speedboats, each one a menacing dart designed for shock and awe. The boats were powered by formidable Yamaha 250 engines, allowing them to tear across the water at incredible speeds. A fearsome red shark emblem was painted on the side of each hull, a symbol that had become synonymous with terror in these seas. The pirates themselves were armed to the teeth with Media Group. Pirates loading AK-103 assault rifles, armed men holding AK-103Z stock and distribute art equally, AK-103 assault rifles, heavy M60 machine guns, and the devastating power of RPG-7 rocket launchers. They were a small, mobile army, perfectly equipped for their violent trade. At precisely 10:14 a.m., El Barón Rojo gave the final command. With a roar of powerful engines, the 15 speedboats launched from their hidden cove, churning the calm water into a foamy wake. They formed a V formation, an arrowhead aimed directly at the heart of the Ocean Serenity. Traveling at a blistering 42 knots, they closed the distance with terrifying speed. They were a pack of wolves descending on an unsuspecting flock. On the cruise ship the party continued, the music played on, and the passengers remained blissfully unaware that a wave of calculated violence was about to crash down upon their peaceful world. The hunt had begun. Back on the bridge of the Ocean Serenity, the first sign of trouble appeared as a flicker on a screen. At 8:46 a.m., Captain Harris noticed a strange interference on his radar system, a ghostly static emanating from the direction of Venezuelan waters. His instincts, honed by years at sea, immediately put him on high alert. He fine-tuned the ship's radio, trying to catch a clear signal through the noise. Suddenly, a fragmented transmission crackled through the speakers. The words were Spanish, spoken with a sense of urgency. Oro, gringo, rapido, gold, Americans, hurry. The message was broken, but its meaning was unmistakable. A cold dread began to settle in the captain's stomach. He immediately ordered his crew to increase surveillance, their eyes scanning the horizon for any visual confirmation of the threat. For a while, there was nothing. The sea remained stubbornly empty, the sun glinting off its surface. But the tension on the bridge was now palpable. The crew moved with a quiet efficiency, their cheerful demeanor replaced by focused professionalism. Captain Harris knew that in these waters, a threat could materialize out of nowhere in a matter of minutes. He hoped his instincts were wrong, that it was just a ghost on the radio, but the grim reality of their location told him to prepare for the worst. Then, at 10:27 a.m., the threat became terrifyingly real. 15 black specks appeared on the horizon, growing larger with astonishing speed. They were the speedboats, closing in like a swarm of angry hornets. Before the crew could even finish raising the alarm, the pirates opened fire. The terrifying whistle of an incoming rocket-propelled grenade cut through the air, followed by a deafening explosion. The first RPG struck the starboard hull, tearing a massive 3.6-meter gash in the ship's steel plates just above the waterline. The vessel shuddered violently from the impact, sending waves of shock and panic through the decks below. A second RPG followed moments later, screaming over the deck and slamming into the promenade. The explosion ripped through the leisure area, shattering glass, destroying lifeboats, and starting a raging fire. The joyful music was instantly replaced by the sounds of destruction and the terrified screams of passengers. The dream had turned into a nightmare. Chaos erupted as people ran for cover, their minds struggling to comprehend the sudden violence. The pirates had announced their arrival not with a warning shot, but with a devastating display of force designed to create maximum fear and confusion. The siege of the Ocean Serenity had begun. The brutal assault threw the Ocean Serenity into pandemonium. On the upper decks, what was once a scene of relaxation became a scene of pure terror. Passengers who had been sunbathing moments before now scrambled for their lives, dodging flying debris and the horrifying sight of flames licking at the ship's superstructure. The sharp cracking sound of automatic rifle fire joined the roar of the explosions as the pirate boats circled their massive prey like sharks, peppering the hull with bullets. The crew, trained for emergencies but not for a full-scale military assault, sprang into action, their faces grim as they guided screaming passengers away from the exposed decks and toward the relative safety of the ship's interior. Amid the chaos, the pirates made their move to board. They skillfully maneuvered their speedboats alongside the towering cruise ship, and with practiced ease, they fired grappling hooks high onto the railings of the lower decks. Within seconds, 5 pirates were scaling the hull, their rifles strapped to their backs. They were the first wave, tasked with securing a foothold and spreading terror. As soon as they clambered over the rail, they began firing indiscriminately. A 63-year-old Canadian tourist, frozen in shock, was struck in the shoulder by a bullet, his cry of pain lost in the overwhelming noise of the attack. Captain Harris, witnessing the boarding from the bridge's security monitors, knew he was running out of time. His ship was under attack, his passengers were in mortal danger, and the pirates were now on board. He grabbed the satellite phone, his hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had to make the call that every captain hopes they never have to make. While his crew initiated lockdown procedures, sealing off sections of the ship to try and contain the intruders, he barked orders into the phone, his voice a beacon of command in the storm of chaos. He ordered all passengers to take shelter in the central corridors and cabins, away from windows and doors. The 5 pirates on board moved with brutal efficiency. They quickly rounded up a group of terrified passengers on the promenade deck, forcing them to the ground at gunpoint. They had created a hostage situation, a human shield to protect them from any resistance. 29 people, including children, were now captives, their lives hanging by a thread. The pirates' goal was clear: to sow enough fear and chaos to paralyze the crew and allow more of their forces to board and loot the ship. For the passengers and crew of the Ocean Serenity, the next few minutes would feel like an eternity as they waited, trapped and helpless, for rescue or ruin. At 10:39 a.m., hundreds of miles away at U.S. Naval Station Mayport in Jacksonville, Florida, Captain Harris's desperate distress call cut through the routine morning chatter. The message was urgent and clear. Mayday, mayday, mayday! American cruise ship, MV Ocean Serenity under pirate attack. We are taking heavy fire and have boarders. Request immediate military assistance. In the command center, the atmosphere shifted instantly from calm to critical. Every officer present understood the gravity of the situation. An American vessel, filled with civilians, was being overrun by hostile forces in international waters. This was the exact scenario they trained for. The call was immediately patched through to Rear Admiral Charles McAdams, a 58-year-old commander with a reputation for decisive action. His face was a mask of concentration as he listened to the report. There was no hesitation. Within 6 minutes of the distress call being verified, he gave the order to launch a full-scale rescue mission. The operation was codenamed Iron Line. The gears of the mighty U.S. military machine began to turn with incredible speed and precision. Alarms blared across the naval station as pilots, SEAL teams, and support crews scrambled to their posts. There was no time to waste. Lives were on the line. The initial response force was a testament to the U.S. Navy's rapid deployment capabilities. 3 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, versatile machines capable of both attack and transport, were prepped for takeoff. They were joined by a UH-60 Blackhawk and a P-8 Poseidon patrol plane, which would serve as the eyes in the sky, relaying real-time intelligence back to command. But the core of Operation Iron Line was its human element: 65 elite Navy SEALs. These warriors, the best of the best, began gearing up, their movements economical and focused. They armed themselves with M4A1 carbines, FN SCAR rifles, and Mk-13 sniper systems. The mission was clear: get to the Ocean Serenity, neutralize the threat on board, secure the passengers, and repel any further attacks from the surrounding pirate boats. The risks were enormous. The pirates were heavily armed and had the advantage of surprise. The SEALs would be fast roping onto a moving ship in the middle of a firefight, with hundreds of civilian lives caught in the balance. But this is what they trained for. As the helicopters lifted off, their rotors beating the air into submission, they carried with them the only hope for the terrified men, women, and children trapped aboard the besieged cruise ship. The P-8 Poseidon aircraft arrived over the scene first, its advanced sensors cutting through the chaos to provide a clear picture of the battle. It confirmed the worst: the Ocean Serenity was surrounded by more than a dozen hostile speedboats, and fires were burning on its decks. The intelligence was relayed instantly to the incoming helicopters, allowing the SEALs to finalize their insertion plan. As the Seahawk and Blackhawk helicopters thundered towards the cruise ship, they were a terrifying and beautiful sight for those below. For the pirates, they were an omen of doom. For the passengers, they were angels of salvation. At precisely 10:54 a.m., the rescue began. The helicopters swooped low over the Ocean Serenity, their powerful rotor wash blasting smoke and water across the decks. The pirates on the surrounding boats looked up in shock, some firing their rifles uselessly at the armored aircraft. Thick, heavy ropes were thrown from the open doors of the helicopters, and moments later, the SEALs began their descent. They fast roped onto the deck with a speed and agility that really defied belief, their boots hitting the deck one after another. They landed in the heart of the firefight, a disciplined force of order descending into pure chaos. The 5 pirates who had boarded the ship were completely outmatched. They had been focused on controlling their hostages, unprepared for such a swift and professional military response. The SEALs moved with surgical precision, communicating with hand signals as they swept across the deck. The engagement was brutally short. Within a mere 7 minutes of landing on the ship, the SEALs had neutralized all 5 pirates on board. They secured the 29 hostages, moving them to a safe location and immediately having medics attend to the wounded Canadian tourist and 3 other injured civilians. The immediate threat on the ship had been eliminated. As the SEALs worked to secure the ship, the pirate speedboats below began to retreat, realizing their mission had failed spectacularly. One boat, however, remained too close, its crew still firing defiantly at the cruise liner. A gunner leaning out of a circling Seahawk helicopter took aim. With a fiery whoosh, a Hydra 70 rocket shot from its pod and streaked toward the water. It struck the speedboat with pinpoint accuracy, resulting in a massive explosion that sent fragments of the boat flying into the air. The message was brutally clear: the attack was over. The U.S. Navy was now in control. With the Ocean Serenity secured and the immediate danger to the passengers neutralized, the mission shifted from rescue to intelligence. While medics evacuated the wounded civilians to the helicopters, a U.S. Navy tech specialist on the SEAL team got to work. He quickly located the radio one of the pirates had been using and, with remarkable skill, patched his own equipment into it. He wasn't just listening to active chatter, he was digging into the device's memory, searching for any scrap of information that could lead them back to the source. It was a race against time, a digital hunt for the pirates' den. His search paid off spectacularly. Buried within the radio's transmission log was a set of active coordinates: 10 degrees, 51 minutes north, 62 degrees, 32 minutes west. The numbers pointed to a specific location on the Venezuelan coast, near the port city of La Guaira. This was no random waypoint, it was a homing beacon leading directly to the heart of the pirate operation. The information was immediately encrypted and relayed back to Rear Admiral McAdams at Naval Station Mayport. The tide of the battle had turned. The hunted were about to become the hunters. Back in the command center, intelligence analysts cross-referenced the coordinates with satellite imagery and existing intel. The picture that emerged was startling. The location was not just a simple hideout. It was the largest and most sophisticated pirate complex in the entire southern Caribbean. The stronghold was heavily fortified, guarded by over 70 fighters, and it served as a warehouse for vast quantities of cocaine, stolen Venezuelan military weapons, and a formidable arsenal of RPGs. This was the nest from which the Vipers had emerged, the base of operations for El Barón Rojo himself. Rear Admiral McAdams looked at the compiled intelligence on his screen. The pirates had attacked an American vessel and wounded American allies. They had shown a complete disregard for human life. Leaving their base intact was not an option. It would only allow them to regroup, rearm, and strike again. At 11:22 a.m., less than an hour after the SEALs had landed on the cruise ship, he made his decision. He gave a new, decisive order: destroy the compound. The mission was no longer just about rescue. It was about eradication. A new operation was set in motion. The new mission, codenamed Operation Tide of Fire, was launched at 11:26 a.m. This was not a stealth operation, it was a show of overwhelming force. From a forward operating base near Puerto Rico, an MV-22 Osprey lifted into the sky. The unique tilt-rotor aircraft carried 20 U.S. Marines, a hardened ground force tasked with the direct assault. Flying in formation with the Osprey were 5 A-10 Thunderbolt II jets, affectionately known as Warthogs. These planes were not built for speed but for destruction. Each one was armed with two 500-pound Mark 82 bombs and a GAU-8 Avenger cannon, a 7-barrel Gatling gun capable of firing 3,900 rounds per minute. The assault force reached the Venezuelan coast with incredible speed. The Marines, carried by the Osprey, were dropped into the dense coastal jungle about 2 kilometers from the pirates' compound. They moved quickly and silently through the thick vegetation, closing in on the enemy's perimeter. As they approached, they were spotted by pirate lookouts, and the jungle erupted with the sound of gunfire. The pirates, armed with their AK-103s and M60 machine guns, put up a fierce resistance, their bullets tearing through the leaves. The firefight was intense, a close-quarters battle in the humid, oppressive heat. Just as the pirates on the ground were focused on the advancing Marines, death arrived from the sky. The A-10 Warthogs swooped in low over the compound, their engines emitting a terrifying roar. The pilots had a clear view of the entire pirate base. The first air strikes were devastatingly precise. One A-10 targeted a convoy of vehicles attempting to flee, obliterating them with a well-aimed bomb. Another targeted a row of 15 large fuel drums, which exploded in a massive fireball that shook the ground. A watchtower was vaporized, and the pirates' main defensive line was torn apart by the sheer explosive power of the Mark 82 bombs. The final phase of the attack was the most terrifying. The A-10s made their strafing runs, unleashing the legendary GAU-8 Avenger. The cannon's distinctive brrrt sound echoed through the valley, a sound that meant complete annihilation. The high-explosive incendiary rounds shredded buildings, vehicles, and defensive positions, leaving nothing but wreckage in their wake. By 11:59 a.m., it was all over. The entire compound was utterly destroyed, leaving behind a smoking 200-yard-wide crater. Operation Tide of Fire was a success. The pirates' sanctuary had been wiped off the face of the earth. The smoke had barely cleared over the ruined compound when the final tally was taken. The swift and overwhelming force of Operation Tide of Fire had been decisive. In the aftermath of the airstrikes and the ground assault by the Marines, 58 pirates were confirmed killed. Another 23, including those who had surrendered during the firefight, were captured. They were taken into U.S. custody to face justice for their crimes. The raid also yielded a massive haul of contraband, including large quantities of cocaine, a significant cache of stolen weapons, and a great deal of cash, the profits of their violent enterprise. El Barón Rojo, Miguel Alvarez, was not found among the dead or captured, leaving his fate a mystery. For the passengers and crew of the MV Ocean Serenity, the ordeal was over. They were safe. Under the protection of the U.S. Navy, the damaged cruise ship was escorted to the nearest friendly port. The wounded were given medical care, and the terrified passengers were finally able to contact their loved ones to let them know they had survived. They would carry the memory of the attack with them forever, a terrifying story of a holiday in paradise that turned into a fight for survival. But they were alive, thanks to the calm leadership of Captain Harris and the lightning-fast response of the U.S. military. Rear Admiral Charles McAdams delivered a simple, powerful message to the press. Operation Tide of Fire is complete. We will not tolerate acts of piracy against our citizens or allies. Let this be a clear message. We will hunt you down, and we will destroy your ability to threaten innocent lives. The operation was hailed as a major victory, a powerful demonstration of America's resolve to protect its interests and its people on the high seas. It sent a shockwave through the criminal underworld of the Caribbean, proving that such brazen attacks would be met with devastating consequences. The red shark emblem would not be seen in these waters for a long time. Yet, as the sun set over the Caribbean, a question lingered in the warm air. The raid had destroyed one major pirate network, but the conditions that created it, poverty, political instability, and lawlessness, remained. Piracy in Latin America was on the rise, fueled by desperation and the vast profits of illegal trade. While this epic showdown had ended in a decisive victory for the forces of order, it was likely just one battle in a much larger, ongoing war. The sea is vast, and as long as there are desperate men and valuable targets, the age-old threat of piracy will continue to haunt these beautiful, treacherous waters.